Everybody's here except, has anybody heard from Dave? I assume he's going to join us, but. All right, we'll call to order the meeting of the zoning bylaw committee for February 1st. We'll call, please, starting with Clark.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Jack Creighton here.
Cassie Malatesti here.
Okay, we're also joined by our assistant town planner, Cassandra Thayer, and Judge Judith Cutler. Welcome all. Do we have anybody else out there? No. Okay. All right, we'll dive right into it. We really only have two things to clean up tonight.
Yeah, I just want to.
Oh, and Dave is here. Okay, thank you, Dave.
Hello, sorry, it took me a minute to get on the computer here.
Hi, Dave.
Hi.
Just,
Alright.
Tom, just a little bit of update. I talked to the town moderator. He will allocate us ample time, as long as it's fairly reasonable, to make our presentation at town meeting.
We'll get to that to item 5 on the agenda. We can discuss that a little bit more because you and I talked today about this too. So.
Yeah, I just want to let you know he's
No,
fine.
that's good. No, that's good. It saves me a phone call. So, all right. So the first thing is to do our final vote on approving the changes for Article 6. Judge Cutler, if you could remind us why we put this off to tonight. I know.
Well, because it was pretty complicated because we didn't have a red line version, and I wanted to make sure everybody was very comfortable with the changes overall organizationally and how they were rewritten, that we weren't doing something that you thought was drastically different from what you already had, because I know you were fairly happy with the sign regulations you had, but we wanted to put in those. I mean, this is something that is of substance, is we wanted to put in those dimensional or height regulations, and we wanted to put in something to explain more about the political signs. But other than that, we took out of my last draft, I took out the provision about the holiday decorations.
Right, which we had decided we were going to leave.
Right.
We don't address it at all. So.
Right, but I think you do address it currently in the business district. In your current bylaw, you allow temporary sort of lights during the holiday season. And do you want to take that out completely?
It's the committee's favor, and then let me see if I can.
I would say that when we want to make sure that people don't use that as a kind of a go around to keep lights up year round. So the holiday
In the business districts.
only in the business district.
Only in the business districts. All right, all right.
Yeah.
So let me put that back in. Let me just make sure I take it out.
So you can be a redneck woman everywhere else, other than the business district.
Oh.
I think that was politically incorrect.
Isn't that the song? Something
Yeah,
about
what it is.
I leave my
I
Christmas
haven't
lights
I haven't
up.
heard that one.
Can we,
Dixie Chicks. Clark.
That's an old song. It's
All right, so the current bylaw is section G. It's the last section of Article 6. And it says in all business district, each premises may display one no, that's not it. Where's the science political? Just that one.
I was just looking for it quickly myself.
Maybe in the prohibitions.
Oh, yeah, right here. Let me share the screen. Hold on.
what section?
Here, right. Can everybody see this right here at B2? I don't know, what's the section? 6.3 B2. Any business or light industry district except for the period of time, and it's, it says it starts Thanksgiving. Hold on, geez. Can everybody see that now?
Yes.
B2. All right, so it says each year beginning with Thanksgiving and ending with January 15th, string of lights. Rather, I would leave that the way it is, you know.
Leave that in?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's probably better to say something than say nothing so people don't
Yeah.
use.
Okay.
I think it's important because the business district, especially, that includes the downtown, doesn't it?
David, your audio is doing weird stuff, so
Oh,
You got an echo.
you got a big, it's like you're on a microphone or a megaphone.
how about now? Can you hear me straight or is it echoing?
No, it's still echoing.
Oh, God. Okay.
Okay, so we'll put in B2 on that under, we'll put it in under signs allowed in business and light industrial districts. So
Okay,
that's the limited time that they're allowed.
okay.
Okay, all right.
All right, so anybody else have any questions, comments about changes to Article 6?
No questions.
All right, can I have a motion to approve for the warrant article, the proposed changes to our Article 6 as amended and as Judge Cutler will refine?
So move, provided that, can you send me it in its final form?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we
Thank
do,
you.
yes. And also, have you looked at the sign definitions that went along with this?
Yes, I'm good with everything.
Good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Somebody second that motion, please.
Second.
Thank you, Cassie.
Do you want those sign definitions to be part of the article that changes the sign regulations under Article 6?
I would just, you know, we don't have to rewrite the whole article. We just want to highlight the changes. So if there are any definitions that are changing, yes, or being added, yes.
Yeah, so do you want to add these definitions into the article that talks about changing and additions of definitions overall, for all of them, or do you want to just?
I think that was the
yeah.
plan, right? That all definitions go in one section.
Except that this new set of regulations has very specific sign names that won't work if we don't have the right definitions to go along with them.
All right, so in our changes to Article 2, we're going to have to change those definitions, those sign definitions.
Right, but I was going to say to the warrant article that addresses the sign regulations, do you want to add on as part 2 the addition of the sign definitions, or do you just want to group all definitions under a single warrant article?
Well,
is there a way to
No,
put
no,
it
no,
in
no, no,
other
let-
than
I-
definitions?
yeah, we
Into
can,
the
we can put
signage
them in the,
section where you'd be using them in the, and it would cause less confusion?
Well, that was something we deferred that decision until a later time because there's pros and cons on both sides.
There
and
is, yeah.
Some articles have the definitions in them now. And so if we're going to take them out, I think that's got to be done sort of at the end of the process and decide whether they went in or out.
yeah, mean,
But I
we're-
think for now we weren't gonna address that particular approach.
Well, is it something we could punt on and continue to discuss during planning board hearings?
Well, you can.
And punt on for now?
let's just see how we're approaching it so far. So when
Yeah.
we do the article on, the warrant article for Article 2, we are taking the definition of abandonment out.
Correct.
When we're doing the warrant article for Article 8, we're adding the definition
Oh,
of.
no, back up.
abandonment.
No, I misspoke. The taking out the definition of abandonment is incorporated into the warrant article that is for the revisions to Article 8, because we now
Okay.
have the abandonment.
Alright.
So we kind of related whatever definitional changes were connected with what we're
Okay.
doing.
Okay, so then let's do this. The warrant article for 6 will be in 2 pieces. The second piece will be to change the definitions that are found in Article 2.
And
Just
add
like-
any that
Right, we'll keep the definitions in Article 2 for the moment, but whatever
Right.
changes we're going to make to them will be
Right,
the part 2 of the warrant article for Article 6. So Article
Right.
6 will have the housekeeping changes, and then it will have the definition changes.
correct. Yeah,
Okay,
okay. All right, so.
Clark,
that-
do you okay amending your motion to that it's going to include that process? the
So
two
moved
steps?
as discussed.
Okay, and Cassie second, okay, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Jack
David,
Grady,
oh, sorry.
So I will get you that
Support.
warrant article for early next week.
All
Like that.
All right,
David
so
Frog.
5-0, okay, thank you. All
Does the
right,
sound
now,
sound better?
what's that? A little
Yeah,
better. Yeah,
does.
yeah, good.
Thank you.
All right, the next one to finalize tonight is the definition of height. Now, everybody, I think, has seen that. Judge, I don't know if you're able to share your screen with it, maybe I can.
I
but-
can't, no.
All right. Cassandra, can you find the email that has her attachment, the most updated one?
This is the
Yes.
modified on 131.
Let me,
So if everybody
open it.
saw that, the judge condensed my version down, which is great. It accomplishes what it's supposed to accomplish. We did at the point of the bottom measurement, what Clark had suggested before the last meeting, about 10-foot intervals. So if we can get that up on the screen, take one good look at it.
Well, I mean, I've read it. If others haven't read it, we should review it. I think it's fine. You know, the only thing that's related to this is whether we're going to the midpoint of a sloped roof or to the maximum point.
Right, because that's a big substantive change between what you have
Yeah,
now.
that's out.
Right.
That has to be out.
Now,
So
if
can we
that's
go-
the way, if that's the way you want it, and zoning bylaws are all over the place regarding this particular issue. If you change the maximum height to 40 feet from 35, then I don't think it makes any difference whether you go to the maximum point.
Can we, Cassandra, would you mind scrolling down to KP's variation? Okay, so we have it there. All right. And this is also bringing in some definition changes to grade and roof line. Okay. So the Article 2 is going to be amended a little bit to include these things, but you know, the research that the working group had done before, you know, in benchmarking, you know, the range of heights is between 30 and 35 feet. 35 is on the high end. We're not an outlier in that respect, but it is the high end of the range. We aren't not addressing that number unless and until we address it when we do the Article 5 table. So I think the principle, the principle is to get away from 40-foot heights that we're allowed to have now. I don't think anybody wants to go to 40 feet. That's not something I've ever heard anybody in the town
Well,
say.
we currently have a 40-foot maximum height.
Yeah, with a sloped roof because of where we decide the measurement goes.
Well, it's 35 foot to the midpoint of rafter
Yeah,
and
which is-
45 foot overall. I mean,
Is
40 feet
illogic.
overall.
I mean, you know, we're going to throw this out there and see how the community reacts to it. But
okay,
you know, if you read stuff
Well,
about
you're just
projects.
taking, you're taking the ability, some height ability for homeowners, their house designers, and you're lowering the overall possible height.
On a sloped roof, yes.
But you're leaving the flat roof exactly the way it is. And I think the way that the bylaw works is the mass of the building would stay kind of the same, because the slope roof building has a narrow top and a wide bottom, whereas a flat roof building is the same at the bottom and and the top. I'm just pointing out that you're taking away some design flexibility for slope roof structures with this language.
To avoid an end result of a 40-foot tall house, yes.
But you're taking some height ability. You're not
I don't-
completely outlawing attics, but you're making it so that they would be difficult to create.
I don't think that's true because the other day I looked up what's the definition of a story, what's the measurement for a story, and 35 feet is plenty to do a 3-story structure with an attic. I get it that as an architect, you want to maximize all of the things you can
Well,
Design.
I mean, yes, I mean, as an
design with, but
architect, you
you
want
know,
to have as much flexibility as possible to allow as many design options that work for fitting the context and the site.
you know, I repeatedly hear from this community that they don't like tall structures that we're getting nowadays. And, you know,
I'd
we're
like-
certainly
I-
we're hearing about it in the village right now. And we've heard about it on any number of large home reviews because, you know,
Right.
the recent trend is for people to maximize this and push the limit of 35 feet. So
Is
if
that-
that's
So,
the
I
trend
mean,
we're dealing with.
In
you know.
some projects that we've seen recently, I'm not going to name them, but certain mixed use type of projects, this change would make would make them 2 stories instead of 3. I mean,
I don't agree. with that.
by taking out the 40-foot maximum and 35-foot to the midpoint of rafter, for buildings, not necessarily houses, a lot of them would have to be limited to 2 stories instead of the potential for 3, even with a diminished 3rd floor. So I think this is the particular, the height definition. If you left it the same, we would change the number to 40 feet. And I think that keeps things sort of the way they are. Actually, it would be more flexible for flat roof buildings, but I
I wouldn't want to see the number 40 anywhere in this bylaw and the
well,
intent,
we have it in the bylaw now.
well.
The
yeah,
maximum height is
and that's
40
the
feet.
that's the problem. The intent of this change was to deal with change, to effectuate change from what we do today,
Oh, okay.
in
well,
that today is not favored.
I
by
understand,
most of the
Tom.
population.
I mean, I guess I knew this day was coming, and I will say, I don't like the substantive change, which is that 35 feet would be the maximum height, measured to the top of a pitched roof instead of to the midpoint, because it restricts and options for homeowners and their designers or architects. So it takes something away. This is taking away something that people have now.
I think that's,
I want to pipe in on this.
yeah,
I
go ahead. It's not the
I-
Clark and Tom show, so.
I don't see that. Can everybody hear me? I don't see this as taking away anything. I see it as definitionally expressing what 35 feet should be, which was the intent of the bylaw. And so the way that we measure it, or have allowed it to be measured, unlike most of the towns, is that it's allowed for the exception to absolutely gobble up the rule. And so in one, I mean, we've got, you talk about 40 feet, Tom. We've got houses that are certainly not only 40 feet, but probably above that, because it's from where they measure. They're not measuring it from the, circumference like you're doing here. And they're cherry picking where they're going to start measuring from the ground. And so we've got houses that are the hell with 40 feet. We've got ones that are above that because of it, because of where they measure. And so
Which is why it was important to put these identified measuring points and multiple measuring points from the bottom to get a true mean grade, rather than what we have now, where people cherry pick 1 or 2 points to measure. And again, that came to us in the planning board a year and a half ago as a practical problem with a new house, so.
Yeah, but when they measure it and they do more measurements than just a couple, but again, guess which ones they're going to use? They're going to use the ones that give them the absolute most, can create the most volume for the house. And that's what's been going on for about 20 or more years even. And so I think with this, it definitionally keeps it to 35, and it's not taking away stuff from people. It's just not allowing people to backdoor on the bylaw that they were able to do before.
Well, I like everything about this, except for where the last line where it says to the ridge line for a pitched roof is where it's measured, because that is taking away a height flexibility that we currently have. I think defining what the grade plane is and how it's measured is necessary. It's just that you're definitely taking away a height option that people currently have. Now, this
Yeah, but I
committee
think people,
might vote
comments,
fine as
comments-
a majority or whatever, the planning board might vote. It's just that I think it needs to be clear to people on the floor of town meeting and any other hearings that we have, that that's what's
Well,
going on.
I think that people, common sense, when people think something is 35 feet high, they think of it to the highest point. I don't think most people appreciate the midline definition until they are confronted with it. I think common sense says, oh, it's 35 feet high. Well, it's 35 feet high to the highest point. Yes, Judge.
I
All right.
don't, but architects and engineers understand the basic structures and what it means to midpoint of rafter.
All right.
As
Right.
opposed to ridge. I think midpoint of rafter is very different than ridge when it's the same. Judge Cutler has a.
Yeah, no, I
wants to-
know. And I was going to record, I was
That's the
just
way
letting
in,
you,
yeah.
I was letting you finish your point. So,
I think I made my point.
Okay, I just have one warning to make, and that is, this is a substantive change.
Right.
There are probably houses now where their height was measured to the midpoint of their roof, and they were only allowed to go 5 feet above that.
Yep.
If those people now, if the ridge line of the roof is above the 35 feet, you're gonna have a number of non-conforming houses. To the extent that there are complaints from residents about, losing their rights, this would be something they could point to if they were aware of it. So that's just something to keep in mind. What you can do is leave this, but when you deal with your dimensional requirements, you can have a 40-foot height or a 38-foot height for sloped roofs, which would accommodate a little more flexibility.
But-
Whereas 35
But
feet.
that's exactly what I said when I started this, where you can change the dimensional table height to have it be 40 feet be the maximum height, which would be no change to people for pitched roofs. So I agree, but this is a substantial change.
You're all missing the point that.
No, I'm not missing any point.
No,
I'm
when
not
we
missing your point,
started to
Tom.
look at this, we were hearing from the community that the increased sizes of houses, which when we get to the table, it's not just height we're going to confront.
No.
But that the overall trend in the size of houses in this community is not favored by a lot of people in this community.
Well, yes, Tom, I know there was that one bubble in one of the master plan documents. It says houses are too big, there's too many. I think if you really want to get an idea for whether people understand this particular issue and whether they want houses to be smaller than what's allowed now, I mean, you could do a survey. You could send a survey out and get that feedback. But just saying a lot of people think that houses are too big and this is a way to make them smaller. I see what you're doing. It's just that I think, and I think,
I don't
and
think.
others probably agree that you're taking away a right that people have now, and you
It's
will
not-
be creating non-conforming structures that are currently conforming. how do you want to deal with that? I mean, a part of it would be messaging as a part of the planning board meetings, messaging as a part of the town meeting. If enough people are on board with this concept, then great. As an architect, I'm a responsible architect and I try and design houses that fit in their context, but hey, look, sometimes you have clients that want to push the envelope. What could you do in that circumstance to make sure that a design structure fits its context if you wanted to make it non-conforming and ask for a variance? And that would just be, you'd need to have a functional variance process. I mean, that's
No, you
the end result of
if you
taking away
frame
rights.
it, you're not, it's incorrect to frame this as a right. Nobody has a right to maximize everything they want to do in their dreams. It is the town's choice to regulate, and that's why we have dimensional tables, and each town can differ. I mean, I first approached this as that just the midline is illogical. I don't see
For
this
you as a lawyer, but not as an architect.
I do not see this as a major tool at restricting house size, because I think it's, an insignificant tool in what it's going to make an attic 5 foot shorter than now.
It
But it's
kills
still,
an attic is what it does.
but
it
it
can-
doesn't kill. No, I would disagree with that because of what the
Well,
the
perhaps we
commonly
should look
understood
at actual
definition of-
diagrams during our planning board hearings.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said, then perhaps we should look at real case examples and diagrams as a part of our planning board hearings for the public.
In terms of
You know,
what?
just
You
as an
wanna give-
example, like Hingham has, I don't know if you can see this. Hingham has their own. Can you
Yeah,
see this?
we drew that. We back at the bylaw working group, we copied from the
Oh, yeah,
Hingham
yeah,
one.
okay.
So
And that-
that's sitting around somewhere. As a matter of fact, Jen Oram is the one who collected it for us before she went over and took the job in Hingham. But
Yeah, oh,
yeah,
again,
we have that somewhere, and I think I don't know.
why don't, I have a feeling I know what Jack thinks about this, but why don't we get Cassie and David to weigh in a little bit more? I mean, I think I've said enough, you know exactly what I think.
Yeah.
I think you've said enough, Tom, I know exactly. what you
I
think.
agree. All right. But I want to say one other thing though. When we go to town meeting and we go to other boards, if this board makes a decision, I trust there will be unanimity and solidarity in putting forth our position.
Well, Tom, I mean, I obviously, last year and a half ago, I opposed that private way war. If we have something from this committee that I don't agree with as a zoning change, and then I'm not gonna agree to go along with what a majority of the board thinks. And in fact, even if I voted for this height definition change, I certainly would reserve the right as a part of planning board meetings and on the floor of town meeting to make the public aware of what they're voting for and exactly what I think or what others might think. I mean, I think that's the right of open town meeting, is for anybody to say what they think. I mean, you guys
I'm not-
tried to
I'm not-
silence
you
me
know
on
what?
on the
I'm not-
private way thing. But you know,
I don't want to rehash that history about what happened there, Clark. You
I just
know,
don't think I don't
It's
think
ex-
it's how town meeting works.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
not,
that
well, it's, yeah.
town meeting is a special place where
Yeah,
we all get to
misrepresenting
say
things
what
at
we
town
think.
meeting is not how it works either, but I'm not gonna.
I was just gonna,
Jack,
I was
do you have
speak,
anything?
I was just gonna speak on behalf of the Master Planning Implementation Committee, because I was there with John Hallen and Jen Oram when we did create that diagram. So just for a little bit of background, I was of the essence that that diagram was to help protect against or create more clarity, like what David was saying, was that there needs to be more clarity on how to take that measurement. Not that we were trying to hinder people from building above or building within a certain restraint. And I by no means want to create a substantial change that's going to hinder redevelopment throughout the communities. And I just can see that coming. And so for us to, in order to maintain credibility, I just think that we really need to think about this. I feel like I'm in a similar vein as Clark and Judge Cutler on this one.
Well, all right.
Well, I'm not
That
opposed
was
to it. I
that
just
was the
need
intent. That was the
I'm not-
intent.
I'm
of
not
that-
sure
of
where
that
the-
diagram.
Now, the diagram by this, I forget who I discussed this with, but the thought
It was-
was that the diagram would show up when we do table, the area table of dimensional regulations. That'll be added to that table. And
But as a
that-
part of the warrant article, wouldn't we need to show what the change would affect? I mean, I'd want to see it as a part of the planning board. I mean, maybe we
can,
should,
you know, we can bring out the sketch, but you
maybe
know,
we should.
who just put, by the way, who just put that up on the screen?
I did.
Okay, so that's the one.
I can
that
bring it
Jen-
back up if you want.
No, that's the one that Jen did a while ago and it's somewhere in your computers and that's great. Okay, because we did do one. And we can certainly bring that with us to all of our presentations.
Yeah,
But
Hingham.
I
and
think
Hingham
it's
has
pretty
that
damn, I
good
think it's pretty
diagram.
damn simple what what we're doing, changing midline to the top. I don't think that's hard for people to grasp and understand.
It's not complex, a concept. It's just that you're taking away overall height. Right.
And I don't
In-
remember that
in
being,
answer
to
I don't
something that-
remember that being the intent of that concept there, Tom, when we did that diagram. It was to
Say that
provide
again?
clarity of taking that. That was not the intent, was to take height off. I thought the intent was to provide clarity of where to take the baseline for the mean grade elevation.
And the top,
It wasn't to take height away from people.
it wasn't taking height away. Height is 35 feet. It's taking it so
Yeah.
that the logical definition of
takes
height
it
is to
away,
the highest
Tom.
point of
It
something.
takes it away.
It
I
doesn't,
would,
ta-
It
well, the
lowers the
community
overall height
doesn't
of a
want 40
structure.
foot. Clark,
period.
with all due respect,
I-
we've heard,
I
a-
think-
we've heard a strong sentiment from the community that they do not want 40-foot houses.
let me pipe in here. What it's doing is Cassie said, is number one, it's creating clarity from previously from what the master plan committee had done before, which they surveyed residents, sent it out. That's what they got as a return as far as talking about the size of houses, the height of houses, things like that. It was not something that was, there's no new survey needs to be done because it's already been done. What we're doing here is you're making 35 again. You're making 35 and not 40, 45, 48, 50. That's what you're doing by clarifying this. You're making 35 actually 35 feet again. That's what we're doing. You're reeling it back in from what was done before. And there's plenty of 35-foot houses in Hingham, Norwell, everywhere else that have sloped roofs. So I don't see I mean, I'll look at some diagrams, but I don't see architecturally how you can't get an attic and make a 2.5, 3-story building out of 35 feet.
You can. And then you look up the definition of what's the measurement of a story, what's the generally accepted measurement of a story. And you can clearly get 3-story built houses in this town under the 35-foot.
Well, I guess just the point is we're lowering the maximum height of a house with a sloped roof with the language here. I'm on board with everything except for the last line. Unless you were to change the overall height to 40 feet
Which
maximum.
I see no sentiment in the community to do that.
Okay, well, that's what we have now. So again, as long as you know you're lowering and taking away rights of height.
Clark, if you frame it as rights, you know, I'll
As
go
of
ballistic
right,
because it's
as
not
of right,
right.
zoning bylaw is you can be a maximum of 40 feet, 35 feet to the midpoint of rafter right now. And then you're gonna be reducing the overall height by of a potential house by 7 feet or more. In some cases, it's an attic killer. In some cases, it isn't. I'm just saying you've got to be crystal clear and not try and pull one over on town meeting.
We're not going to. All
Well,
right,
And
no,
I do recall from one of the public forums that there was a sentiment that if it wasn't allowed to fail to do 3 stories, it would hinder redevelopment in the downtown and fundamentally against it.
Right. Yeah,
Well-
that's just one area example. And I think to some extent, this would reduce potential future development in the village to 2 stories, not
Yeah.
3.
So
But
you're just gonna
I would say
stop.
we need to do the analysis in order to prove one way or the other what's possible and flexible. It's easy to say, hey, if
Well-
everybody has a 7-foot high ceiling, then this still allows you to have some kind of an attic.
I'll say this, that if, some of the sentiment expressed on 143 is that building is too high, the Red Lions is high, where I kind of thought the sentiment was kind of laughable, since we have other buildings that are 35 feet in the village, and we have buildings that have always had the opportunity to be 35 feet high and have chosen not to for whatever reason. But if, the argument about I don't want to confuse the article at the village, concerns about the village versus residential. And when we get to the table, there, I think, is where we could make differentiations. When we say the maximum height in different districts, today we just have 35 feet everywhere. We have talked about lowering that in the harbor because of the flood elevation. Well, we could also make an adjustment in the village. Maybe we say to the community, 37 feet or 40 feet is okay for the village. Now, there will be people who will bitch and complain about that, as they are right now, because they want the village to stay frozen in time. But I think those are where we make any differentiations between our different districts. But
Well,
But I think-
I think
I
this
think it makes sense
definition,
to
this
have-
definition,
I-
Have analysis
trying to
based
speak here
on
for-
specific.
the
Sorry.
definition should hold, and what we do with the actual numerical measurement can be dealt with district by district when we deal with the table of under Article 5.
Well, I can tell you that the sentiment around town is very clear that height is a problem. And they want the new zoning to address that definitively and take away the loopholes. And Tom's methodology, I think, has a lot of merit, because it really takes away the ability to kind of game the height. So, and as an overall, if in fact there's a need in the village, well, we could address that need in the village. And I see the harbor restricting that. We are going to have, when people see how high the condos are in the harbor, there's going to be, and we're already hearing it from people who've looked at it, just complaints about how did it get so high, et cetera, and so on.
Okay.
So I think we need to have a uniform enforceable standard around that. And if somebody wants to make the argument, as Tom pointed out, that we need more height in the actual village, let them make that argument, and we could consider it, but I think this works.
If I may,
I'm
I
just- Yeah.
don't think there's
Hold
any issue with most certainly looking at our commercial districts when we get to the dimensional tables to make sure that they're appropriate. Because from the previous ones we do want to make sure that they can potentially do 3 stories and not restrict things in the village. But I would say, when it was asked, is there a sentiment out there about the height of the building? That I have never heard anybody tell us that the residential buildings or commercial buildings are too short in Cohasset. And if you could find that person, please bring them to this committee, because I have never heard any sentiment from anybody saying that our buildings are too small, are too short, and we need to make them much taller than they are today. So when regards to height, I think this tidies it up. And if there is some adjustments that need to be made to the dimensional table for commercial districts, most certainly those can be revisited. But in most commercial districts, especially in the village, you got to remember when they're doing it from the grade is relatively the same. The reason you have the problems in the residential side is that the grades are totally different and uncertain. And the
Right,
topography,
it can be all over the place.
yeah, the
Big
topography.
pieces of ledge and.
Now there are some places in the commercial aspects that could be a little bit like that. When you get to 3A and places like that, there could be some variations in topography. But for most of our commercial places, they're relatively flat and the grades are standard. So, but there is an exception again with some parts of 3A. So With that said, I would just leave it at that, that if we need to revisit some of the dimensional requirements, we could certainly do that for the dimensional table.
Yeah, I think that's
'Cause,
an
yeah.
elegant compromise. I think that solves that. And also in the village, face it, the properties in the village are going to be flat roof. So 35 feet with a flat roof is easily 3 stories. So anyway, and if we're doing the dimensional tables and we see a need in the village, we can change that now. But I think we can.
And by the way, we may need to see a change in 3A from 35 feet and how, depending on how we deal with this MBTA housing thing, because we have to allow for zoning for certain types of housing. So I think we have a common sense definition and then apply the numbers we want to apply district by district.
Well, your standard commercial mixed use project has a 13 to 16 foot first floor. That's minimum that's required for ductwork and sprinklers and normal stuff. So I think it makes sense to look at examples and go through the actual diagrams, the actual dimensions, and see what this definition change, how it would affect the potential projects in the future. Both on the, I mean, it's
Well, you know what,
very
one
different for
one
single
pleasant,
family houses in commercial district type buildings. I really feel like homeowners are a special class of project where they're dealing with all kinds of things. They might have kids that they need another bedroom for, that can only go on the third floor. It's different to give up something on the single family residence side. And then the potential for making 3A and harbor and village projects less economically viable, or even economically viable at all, because we're proposing a reduction of 7 feet or so in overall height, and we don't really understand how it's affecting things yet.
Well, I don't think we need to filibuster this, forever. We've heard all of the issues, and I think we need to decide which way we want to go. Otherwise, we'll be here. till
Yeah, we
midnight.
could just take a
I
vote
know,
on
I
it right
just-
now.
I just, one more thing, Cassandra, can you put up the text again? There was one thing that caught my eye in the judge's text.
I have 2 possible corrections that I wanted to
Well,
suggest.
where you were describing the pre-construction grade and the finished grade,
Mhm.
one has the 10-foot equidistant intervals that Clark had suggested. The other still has the 12 measurements from the original proposal. I think those should match. Those should match. I think.
They do match.
Oh,
At least 12 grade measurements taken at 10-foot equidistant intervals.
all right. I'm sorry. I'm misreading the small. I'm sorry.
And
My bad.
one other question, would these definitions, would we be voting to recommend them from this committee, each individually or as a class?
Right now,
It's as a
right,
class?
no, right now, the idea, Article 2, the part that's getting amended by Article 8 will be dealt with Article 8. The part that's getting amended by Article 6 will get amended in Article 6. In the Article 2, right now, it's written for all changes at once. We could break it up. We could break it up into 5 parts, 6 parts, however many there are.
Sure.
That might be the safer thing to do.
Right, so you get 95% and it for sure, and then
Yeah, I don't want.
whatever
I don't want-
happens, you
I
make the
don't want
best
height
case.
Yeah, I don't want height to kill the other stuff, but,
That seems practical, Tom.
all right, then we'll redo the article to break it up into multiple parts. You got that?
You don't want
That's-
to, you don't want a separate article on height. You want it all in one.
No,
together.
just, it'll be the warrant article. We've done this before at our town meeting where we've had a single article that has multiple parts to it that rise or fall separately. We
And
do
it's-
that with
And I think the
community
operative
preservation
definition,
thing. Yeah, we do that all the time.
The operative definition is for roof line. Everything else I'm on board with.
With respect to minutes, I am feverishly trying to write down what everybody
I'm
has.
sorry,
but
Tom, I'm sorry, I don't mean to belabor this. I just want to point to two things that I would like to change to this draft.
Yeah,
One is in the definition of height, in the first sentence where it says, or the highest point of any other structure. Instead of saying any other structure, I think it should say of a structure other than a building, just to be clear.
okay, I'm sorry, go back.
Okay, so it's the highest point of the building roof, or the highest point, right now it says the highest point of any other structure, but I'd like to substitute the highest point of other than, of a structure other than a building,
Okay,
just to be clear. It's not a building.
okay,
Okay, so this would apply to
all right,
the
all right,
lines, right?
all right, I got that.
And then the other thing was, I thought we should just clarify the 10
Scroll
feet
down, Cassandra.
down to the definitions of pre-construction grade and finished grade. We
Yeah.
end both of them, the continuous line, 10 feet distant. I think just to make absolutely certain, belt and suspenders, 10 feet distance of said foundation.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Now, in breaking up the warrant article for Article 2, we'll separate out each definition, but these grade and roof line definitions will stay coupled with height. They'll all,
Yes.
those three will rise
Yes.
and fall together.
Right.
Okay. All right, as amended, can I have a motion that we approve warrant article, well, to add to the warrant article that we've already approved for Article 2, the proposed definition changes to height, grade, and roof line. Somebody,
I make the motion.
thank you. I'll second if we don't hear anybody. All right, roll call, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, nay.
Okay, Tom Callahan, aye.
Jack, you're
Jack?
muted.
Sorry, Jack Creighton, aye.
David Farag, aye.
Cassie Malatesta, nay.
Okay. All right. We'll move forward with that. All right, the next thing on our agenda was about moving application stuff into regulations. I threw that, I won't say I threw it together quickly. There's been various versions for this for the last 2 years, but I only distributed to you tonight. But before we got started, Judge Cutler was mentioning to me the idea of putting it off and just deal with moving stuff out into regulations as we go through each article individually, rather than this approach, which takes out a bunch of stuff. Because what is proposed in that and what I put together is both application stuff, and with a couple of articles, it's also design standards. As we were discussing, correct me if I'm wrong, Judge Cutler, the planning board can still go ahead with promoting regulation, passing a regulation on a uniform, application standard, how many copies, size of plans, scale of plans, that kind of thing, which was one of the intents. We can still go forward with that. It maybe gives more time to get all the other land use boards on board with that concept of having a uniform standard. So I'm okay with that. If it's,
just wouldn't adopt it until just before you're gonna vote to take them out of any that are in the bylaw, out of the bylaw, just because you may have some inconsistencies with what the board adopted and what's in the bylaw, just to avoid that. If you're adopting regulations that are not different or than are in the bylaw, that's fine. But if you're going to require something different, if the bylaw says you have to submit 2 copies and you're saying, no, you need 5 copies, you're going to just have arguments with people, as to
Yeah.
which it is. That's all. I mean, that's just,
All right, yeah, and I mean, again.
Yeah.
The end of this process in the fall will possibly be, complete reorganization, and that's possibly when we just take all of this stuff out. But, on the planning board now, rather than get something in place before this town meeting, we have the leisure to deal with it as
Right.
we want, which is fine.
Right.
All right, so I assume there's a consensus on doing that and avoiding this warrant article.
Yeah, the only thing is, Tom, is on the design standards, was, we talked about before, is that the planning board could update those before town meeting in some way, shape or form. Because I think that that's something that was in the forefront of a lot of people's minds with the, some of the projects they've had on 3A and things like that. And so when we come, even with the housekeeping articles, yeah, when we come even with the housekeeping articles, people are gonna say, well, what about the designs of this, that, and the other thing? And
Yeah.
you don't pick it off and say, well, we're gonna do regulations for that later. I think that needs to be done up front so that people know that the step has already been taken, that at least there's some type of, even if they're informal as to, from the sheets that they have, with the village thing that they hand out and the for 3A, but that needs to be addressed before we step to town meeting. So at
Yeah.
least the people know that your committee has already, taken the lead on that.
you mean
Yeah.
in the fall? You're talking about in the fall when we bring these other changes. But there's no need for them this time around. There's no related design standards to the articles we're presenting now.
No, but
Right.
they have these things that they hand out informally as to what the standard should be or what they should look like or things like that.
Well,
Those should be,
we have guidelines for the harbor and the village that.
that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, we're put together in 2018, so they're not outdated yet. There's one section in there about being creative that probably needs a tweak, but the sentiment that we're hearing, in the online community is, we should have some design standards for 3A. And especially since we may be making some changes to address housing, we probably should. And so the planning board can take that up at any time. And we've talked about it. We've talked about making the guidelines, regulations to the extent that has some greater legal impact.
Well,
And
you
then,
still need to reference them, Tom. You're gonna need to incorporate them by reference into the zoning bylaw. They can't stand
oh,
alone.
yeah. No, I get that. And then
Yeah.
we will, and again, I think that's a topic for Articles 4 and 5 when we get into that. So, but the planning board is hearing loud and clear that people want something done about 3A. I don't think anybody has a sentiment of getting into design guidelines for residential houses. I don't think we want to go into that quagmire. But I think, people have differences in taste about a certain building on 3A. I don't particularly get it, but the community is telling us do something, and so the planning board can certainly take that up. And
So what is the design review board?
that has been more.
We have one. It's just
been
been
moribund for
inactive.
decades. Yeah,
And
it hasn't.
it excludes residential
Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway.
but it doesn't actually function at this point?
No,
or-
it was an advisory board for commercial projects, and I don't think it has sat in probably 2 decades, if not longer at this point.
No, that's not true. When I was first on the board, we used it. I think it's just been defunct for 7 or 8 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I just want to mention that it's referenced in the site plan review. I think, I can't remember whether it's in the site plan review or in the special permit where, the circulating to other departments includes the
Yeah, it's
design.
just, we don't have one, but it's still there on the book, so we won't change that language right now, but, and that, I think the planning board took a huge step in doing some guidelines for the harbor and the village that hadn't existed before. I guess the planning board has to decide, do we want to take on all of that, or do we ask the select board to get a design review advisory committee back up and running? That's a decision.
I don't
we make.
see guidelines as a heavy lift. I see it as a couple of tweaks for the village one. When we get to 3A and the other places, that might be more it might end up being that we're going to end up doing the design guidelines and tying it into the bylaw more. But at least, or the design standards, excuse me. But for the guidelines, you already have a set right now. I think a couple tweaks here or there could close a couple of the loopholes on that front. But it is something, the 3A one might be a bigger kettle of fish that we're gonna have to deal with.
All right, well, I'll see that the planning board that we get working on that. If we're not gonna need to rush passing a new regulation before town meeting, which we were planning for maybe our second meeting in March or a meeting in April, we can start, at least with the first step of turning the guidelines into regulations. We could start with talking about a uniform application standard, for what's submitted to a board. And then I'm seeing our architect as being the person who lead the way of beginning to develop 3A guidelines. And I don't know that those necessarily have to be different than the harbor and the village, by the way, which sets, overall a colonial type design.
Well, on the harbor guidelines, we basically use the village guidelines and tweak them.
Yeah.
But 3A is.
But anyway, that's something the
different
planning
animal.
board can, that's something the planning board can take up, and I'll pledge to you that we'll get.
May I suggest that we finish what we have on the plate now? We have a lot on the plate, and that thing is probably better handled later on. It's good to have it on the radar screen, however, but let's get
All
this
right.
done.
All right, item 5 is about the presentation of the form and the article rollout. So I have started to work on the presentation thing, and I could show you some of it. There's an introduction and sort of a little history lesson to just orient everybody about the bylaw, what it is, how long we've had it, when we had major changes. And it's good that the moderator is going to give us a little time to make a presentation. It doesn't need to be longer than 5 minutes, would probably be a little more than 5 minutes. Right now, I'm setting up
Just a quick point. Is it possible to send the content that you have to Cassandra and Lauren?
no,
And have
I
them
intend,
format it? Because
No,
they
I
did a
intend to
great
do it.
job at the last forum. They took my random chaos of images, documents, and ideas and turned it into something that was cogent.
When we finish tonight, I'm going to be working on some of the text. I'll have the slides and the text finished. Because the parts that I'm working on at the moment is the side-by-side comparisons of the changes in all these articles. And I had typed up stuff and now I lost it, so I have to recreate one. But
Oh, that's.
I'll have that all done.
But who does the format into warrant articles? The one with the layman's description and then the actual, this word comes out, that word goes in.
Yeah.
Who
Judge
does that?
Cutler, I don't know if our town,
I've been sending them to you.
she's formatting the actual warrant article. But what we
okay,
have,
great.
Judge Cutler, I think you and I have talked before that in all of our warrant articles, and maybe other towns do it, we have a little short explanatory blurb in a
We should,
box.
we should just get some copies of our old ones and send them to Judge Cutler so she has those.
So I would leave it for you to do the little explanatory blurb.
All right.
All right, so back to talk to Cassandra, Lauren last week, Cassandra today, because more than one selectman has said, get publicity out there, get postcards out there. It's in the budget to do postcards. We're going to have postcards going out about the 27th and notifying people about the 8th before the planning board. We will blast publicity in every way, shape, or form that Justin knows how to do. And the presentation is really a test run for town meeting. And then we can tweak, we can shorten, we can lengthen, and right now, my thinking is, and I talked about this with Jacqueline earlier, is that present the articles 1, 2, 3, 6, 12, and leave 8 to the last one, because I think where we're going to get any debate, extensive debate, will be on Article 8.
What about 19?
Oh, and then, 19 would come before that too. we're expecting, just small housekeeping articles on 19. The individual presentations of these articles would be short and sweet to the ones that are really just minor changes. There'll be side-by-side comparisons up on the screen. People want to ask a question about something, fine, but I see that we'll have a debate about the height definition, obviously, and the single lot exemption.
Just
But
to,
we, again, the presentation on the 27th and the presentation to the planning board will be test runs, and we can tweak, adjust, make adjustments to how we're going to do it at town meeting.
okay, so couple of things. I was in talking to town moderator with Danny at length. What he thinks makes sense is that we make sure that everything that we present in the presentation at town meeting be organized and be as brief as possible, but he understands that we need to do that properly. But he strongly suggests that we make sure that everything that we do that's presented at town meeting has also been presented at public meetings, and we so inform the public. And that's exactly what Tom is suggesting, that the public meetings are a dress rehearsal for what we present. And if we do it that way, then we will forestall a lot of the complaints about this is sprung on the last minute, et cetera, and so on. And as Tom has alluded to, the select board has made it very clear to, and Cassandra, you're well aware of this, that we really want Justin working with Cassandra and Lauren to put together a very good communications process, and whatever resources, within reason, of course, that you need to do this job well, that's fine. Just do it. That's what we want to see. We don't want to give any opportunity for people to be able to say they didn't know, it wasn't put out. So I think that's what we're looking on the select board level to get that done. And if needed, I communicated with Judge Cutler, if needed, if it's deemed necessary to have a synopsis from town council, which Judge Cutler, that of course means you, we may decide it's good to distribute that beforehand or as part of the package. That has not been decided, but that is part of an option that we can do for whatever we feel is the most effective way to get this passed.
And the other thing, Judge Cutler, as you're getting these articles finalized and Cassandra and Lauren are getting them on the zoning bylaw page, the slideshow will be on the page. The slideshow, because of the side-by-side comparison of the articles, might be long, and to print, 250 copies of that and have them on people's chairs at town meeting might be a little cost prohibitive. I don't know. We'll have to think about that. If there can be some kind of much shorter synopsis, great, but we'll show these slides up there. I just don't want people that, for example, Article 1 is so inconsequential in the changes. I'd like to brush through that in 3 minutes.
Yeah,
But-
Tom, I don't think you need to overfocus for town meeting or any of the meetings on the true housekeeping,
No, I
cleaning
don't
up.
intend, I don't intend to.
It's
but
just the stuff that might affect people's rights, and
I
there's not
agree.
much of that.
I agree, and I just, but somebody may ask a question, somebody will say, oh, you seem to be rushing through this,
Well, you don't have to go through every single thing. I mean, if it's really truly housekeeping with one or two exceptions, then you just focus on the one or two exceptions. and-
yeah, I mean,
See
for
what
example,
happens.
Article 1, to the extent people will have had the opportunity before May 1st to actually see the changes in the side-by-side comparison, if they took the time to go look, I would just say, these are just housekeeping changes. Unless anybody has a specific question upon them, I would just move the article, and I'd do the same with
Sure.
probably
And
Article 3. I
That
probably
was,
did the
that
same
was
with-
the point that Danny made in our discussion, that when we're doing housekeeping things that has been done and approved by this committee, by the select board,
Planning board too.
a note from
Yep.
town council, people will be inclined to say, we just want to make sure this has been properly vetted. That's fine. So
Yeah.
we don't need to spend a lot of time with that. We just need to say, this is some housekeeping, we're consolidating. And it's passed muster by town council. It's been approved by the various committees and have been approved by the select board. End of story.
Right, when
Yeah.
it's written right there in
sounds
the
perfect.
warrant,
Yeah,
when it's written right there in the warrant that, you know, it was a 5-0 vote of the selectmen, it was a 5-0 vote of the planning board, it was a 6-0 vote of the ZBA advisory, so on and so forth. Then that leaves very little to
Exactly,
kick
Yep.
around.
exactly.
I just threw up on the screen though, just the beginning pieces of this, and you'll all get this. I just need it. I'll have it finalized by the weekend, but yeah.
Just one point on the postcard. You mentioned referring to the committee's website. It might be useful if you included on that the actual address, the web address, so that people say, well, I couldn't find the website or whatever, you know, but give them the
Oh,
link.
all right, yeah,
Right.
Cassandra, can you make a note of that to direct people straight to the zoning bylaw committee page?
Yes, that was my plan.
This
Okay,
is
great.
on my dad's 95th birthday.
Oh,
Should we have a cake?
I think we should, but I think I'll celebrate with him early.
And, okay, but anyway, let me, where's my, yeah. So, you know, that's just the blah, blah, blah. To make sure we introduce everybody. That's me wanting to thank the past members. I don't know if anybody wanted, but some of these slides came from one I had, a slideshow I put together a year ago when we first thought about rolling this out in the working group. And, you know, so I want to, since we're, you know, the town hasn't dealt with a comprehensive change to the bylaw, maybe since 55, but certainly not since 86. I thought it would be best to educate people on a little background. So explaining what every board is doing in this process, just a quick framework of what zoning is in Massachusetts, how it's done, you know, framework for Cohasset, how we do it. A little quick history lesson. What we are proposing to do and why, I think that would be important to some people, that I want you to all take a real close look at for how we are explaining this to the community. And then this just is quickly explaining what the bylaw is structured at the moment, and what our approach has been to this rewrite, and explaining what we've been doing and how we've been doing it, and what the two-step process is looking like at the moment. And then we'd get into the specific amendments, and as you can see, it would be a side-by-side thing. You know, it's, again, I don't think it's going to be practical to have printed copies of this slideshow available on everybody's chair, but we want to make it available on the website. I don't, you know, any other ways of suggesting that people can get at it would be great. And, you know, and then, you know, we'll see what people react to, you know, you know, at that forum, you know, we're going to discuss height, and we're going to discuss single lot exemption, and we'll
Tom,
see
at
what-
the forum, it may make sense to have a copy for everyone that we expect to
Yeah,
come.
yeah, I mean, if
60
we can-
copies, if we run out, then no big deal.
yeah,
But
yeah.
probably not for the floor town meeting. Hey,
No,
oh,
that-
I got company. Wait a minute, let me mute. Hey,
So, you know, so that's, like I said, I just need to finish up some of the comparison charts for the different articles, and we'll get that to everyone. The advisory committee reached out to me the other day, and I said to them, you know, I said, well, we had been planning to see you after the planning board, but the, you know, select board, we, you know, kind of like April, late March, April, but I'll accommodate whatever schedule they want. You know, I gave them the one-page summary that I gave to the select board last week. So they at least have that to chew on. I guess Mary McGoldrick and Diane, Patrick Kennedy are the liaisons from advisory to this committee. So I don't know if I've never seen them in the crowd here at our meetings, but so they reached out, and then, you know, the only other play was to really get the endorsements of advisory, the select board, and I think we owe it to the zoning board to get their endorsement and make a presentation to them. I don't, you know, the alternative energy
That's
committee,
practical.
you know,
It's zoning, after all.
yeah, and they,
In
and
a way, they're
particularly, well, I
least
particularly want
as
them on
expert
board
as
with
anyone.
yeah, and particularly I want them on board with Article 8. You know, we've had Woody's participation, but we haven't heard really from the whole zoning board, so that'll be very important. I don't think there's anybody else that we need to single out to go see, but you know, we'll see what happens.
What's that?
And right
Judge
now,
Cutler?
I guess, did you discuss with Danny at all the idea of doing it on a separate night?
I did not, because we are a little pressed for time,
All right,
but I really, quite honestly, I think look, we can get this done. We
I
don't
agree
have
with Jack.
spend much time as we think, because as Danny pointed out, the town meeting, as long as they see this been properly vetted on most of this, they're like to say, oh yeah, you did your work, that's fine.
yeah,
It's
all
not
right.
controversial. The ones that are controversial, we'll be able to get to yay and nay those in a very short period of time.
Yeah,
So,
that'll be up to Danny, you know, to control the course of the debate.
For another second town meeting, good luck.
Yeah, no, that might be more of a concern in the fall when we'll be dealing with a lot of substance and we'll probably have 10 to 12 articles. You
If
know.
there's more content,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
might be an issue.
All right, so that's that. Yes,
Mention March 8th. What is March 8th?
March 8th is the planned date for our planning board section 5 here.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the 23rd. No?
No, well, the 23rd would be the fallback if we have to go 2 nights, but the idea was to get it knocked off. We don't have anything else on the planning board agenda, so there's no reason we can't get through it in one night. We don't have a lot of applications in the pipeline at the moment.
So are you in the planning board public hearing notice? Are you going to reference where people can see the
Yes.
written? Okay. And so, yeah, so we just need to make sure that well before the 27th of February, we have everything up there.
Yeah, well, that's why, yeah, so,
We won't have Article 19 at that point approved. I'll have it written and I'll have it sent to you before, you know, for your review on the 22nd of this month. But I don't know if you're going to have it approved by the 22nd.
yeah,
you know.
I'm anticipating that we will, and yes, and so me finish the slideshow, get everybody's comments, you finish the articles, yeah, you and I both have little deadlines to work with.
Okay.
And what was I gonna say, on the planning board, I've asked Cassandra to look into whether the planning board meeting can be hybrid like the forum will be. I think we should shoot for that if we can. About, you know, that'll be, you know, the introduction of the planning board back to live meetings. So, but if we can do it, if we can get the room that night over at Wilcott Commons. So yeah, we're going to try to publicize the hell out of it. Justin was out today, I guess. So, you know, he's been good about it. Just, you know, we can tell people it's on the website, town website and the committee's page, but you know, we got to convince people to go and look at it. You know, and I don't know what magic it is there, but does anybody know, by the way, with the postcard campaign, was there good attendance at these alternative energy forums? They
No
just
idea.
had the other night and last week, because they did a postcard campaign to publicize that. And I just wondered if they had good turnout for it. But, all right, that's, unless anybody else has any thoughts about that. We have minutes from 123.
Tom, just a note in terms of advertising for March 8th. we're going to have to send the information to the newspaper probably by next week in order for them to have it in time to then advertise it for 2 consecutive weeks ahead of that, just a note.
Okay, okay. Easy enough.
Thank you, Cassie. We rely upon you to make sure those deadlines are aware of, so you can do what you need to do. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm sure somewhere in the computer is buried notices for Article Section 5 hearings we've done in the past and just copied. All right, minutes of January 23, is everybody? seeing them?
Motion to approve the amended minutes of January 23.
Okay. Somebody second?
Second,
Thank you, Cassie. All in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
David Farag, aye.
Cass Malatesta, aye.
Okay. All right. Anybody have anything else before we go? Not anticipated.
I was just- Last, I was gonna say before we go, I'm glad we had a lively debate about height tonight. And I think that's how you get a much better bylaw out of it. I think if you have any committee and everything just sails through at 5-0, it's that's when you got to look twice at it. So I think having a good lively debate on some of the articles was really good, and we're going to get a much better bylaw out of it.
Well
that-
said, David.
Go ahead,
And
Cassie.
it'll be interesting to hear sentiment of people, because people, and Jack has said, there's a sentiment that says do something about this, but then of course the devil's in the details when you actually do it. And it'll be a precursor to what we might suggest, when we get to the table, Article 5, so.
And one of the things that Danny really pointed out is when it's clear to the town meeting, there's been robust vetting of this and debate, and that people from the floor can make suggestions that changes it, then everybody says, hey, listen, we've had the debate, everybody's had a chance to weigh in. Points that asked for change were either thought about and accepted or rejected. So the vetting process, and that goes a long way to getting this thing, passed.
We could also have in our back pockets some language if we're anticipating someone moving to amend some of the language, for example, the height. We can have the correct language in our back pockets and ask the person to use that as the amendment instead of something made up off the fly on the floor.
That's
Yeah,
why,
because you
that's
don't
why-
want chaos on the floor of town meeting.
No, and that's why
Well,
we're
that-
doing these,
that's
that's why we're
great.
rolling these out to try to anticipate those and be ready for it and not be chaotic. I mean,
Yeah, that's smart.
we have the
well,
luxury. of
we
up
have
until
we have the best attorney on the Eastern Seaboard, so I suggest we take her suggestions, and I'm more that way to judges anyway, even if they don't have the power to put me in jail. I just want you to know
Never had the power
that.
or didn't exercise it.
All right, so I think we're finished. If anybody wants to, unless somebody else has something they'd like to discuss.
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Okay, roll call, please.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
David Farag, aye.
Cass Malatesta, aye.
All right.